welcome everybody. My name's Dave Reister. I'm serving as the chair of our committee. And this is the meeting for LTD STIF Advisory Committee. Today is Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. And we'll go ahead and do roll call. So please say here when your name is called. Phil Barnhart. Phil, are you on? Oh,
I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kelly Clark. Kelly's absent. Joshua Kaczynski.
Here.
Brenda Kosadar.
Here.
Susie Lacer.
Here.
Thank you, Susie. Joshua Myatt.
I am here. Good evening.
Good evening. Eugene Oregon.
Here.
Hi, Eugene. Cosette Reese.
Here.
Hi, Cosette. And I'm here. Carrie Turner.
Here.
Thank you, Carrie. Vidal Francis. Absent. Gino Grimaldi. Absent. And Pete Knox.
Here.
Great. Thank you, Pete. All right. Now that we're done with roll call, we have a quorum. Agenda review. You should all hopefully have a copy in front of you. We will start in a moment here with public comment. And then after that, we'll have some updates on the STIF formula plan. And I think we'll hear from both Kathleen and John, along with Dave, all from LTD. And then we'll review the STIF formula plan, similar speakers, and we'll have time for group discussion with the committee. And after that, we'll look for potential recommendation after discussion from the committee to the LTD Board of Directors. Our goal tonight is to see if we can get through discussion and a final recommendation. If we do that, then there would not be a December 10th meeting. But if we have a long discussion and we don't get through it, we can still have that December 10th meeting. And then after that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. So any questions on the agenda before we go to public comment? Okay, hearing none, I'll open up the public comment. Anybody here to speak from the public? Seeing or hearing none, I'll go ahead and close the public comment. And with that, I will invite Kathleen to start us off with some updates, please.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Ellie, oh, I've got it. Never mind. Yeah, so I wanted to give everyone an update that we've been waiting for on the STIF discretionary projects. You probably remember we talked about them back in October, and you all reviewed them and provided feedback, and they then moved their way forward to the Oregon Department of Transportation and yesterday to the Public Transportation Advisory Committee. You can see those steps here on the slide. So we reviewed them in early October. ODOT completed their review of the projects, and then yesterday, as I said, the PTAC met, and PTAC accepted ODOT's recommendations and voted to forward those recommendations to the Oregon Transportation Commission. So there's one final step for them to go through, but at this point, we can feel fairly certain that in the past, OTC has accepted PTAC's recommendations, and we feel certain enough in those recommendations at this point to make some budget changes based on them. But I'll start with the good news, which is that every single project in Lane County got funded. They all got funded at 100%, except for one, which got funded at 90% of its original ask. And they all, I don't know if you all remember, but we had a sort of complicated conversation about match rates at the time. And some of the projects we had anticipated getting a 50% match rate. But all of those projects where we had anticipated and budgeted for a 50% match rate were actually funded at a 20% match rate. So yeah, it's a lot of good news. So thank you all for your work reviewing those projects, and I'll just go through them briefly, just doing a quick overcap. So the Diamond Express, which is the Oak Ridge to Eugene service, was fully funded. That was one of the ones where we thought it might be funded at 50% match, but it was funded under intercommunity funds at a 20% match. The Florence Mobility Hub planning project was fully funded with a 20% match. The Rural Lane County On Demand shuttle pilot program is the one that was funded at 90%. They essentially cut out the money we had allocated for administration, but were able to pick that up in a different budget item that we had for stiff administration. So that works out fine, and that was at a 20% match. Shopper shuttle replacement, that too fully funded at 20%. And the downtown and riverfront circulator pilot was fully funded at a 20% match rate. Some of you may recall that originally this project was sponsored by the city of Eugene, but over the past few months, City of Eugene and LTD had been collaborating on the project to begin with, and over the past few months with more collaboration, we decided that it would come under LTD's leadership since it's going to involve changing LTD service. But we'll be continuing to work closely with the city on that project. Kate, do you want to talk about the two Link Lane?
Sure. Yeah, so you can see here that both the Florence to Yachats connector and the Eugene to Florence connector were fully funded with that 20% match rate, which is great. That's all with state funds. So we're excited about that as well.
Yeah, it's all really good news. And as you'll see, as we go through some of our budget adjustments in the next few minutes, that it made a pretty good difference. Overall, it was a difference of about, I think it was 730,000 that we gained back because we got the lower match rate. So Don and Dave are going to walk you through some of the budget adjustments that LTD has made. And then after they're done, Kate will walk you through several for Link Lane and LCOG.
Right. Thank you, members of the committee. So today we're going to be going through staff's recommendation for a 120% budget proposal, which puts us even with the estimates we're given from Oregon Department of Transportation. We've already kind of talked at length about what each task is. So I'm going to be just very quickly talking about what some of the changes that are highlighted since the last time we talked. We're going to have some later slides that talk about both STIF formula funds as well as the STIF carryover. And those are essentially some arbitrary allocations that staff has made to be able to align each task with either leftover funds from the current biennium that have remained unspent or new funds that are going to be allocated as part of the upcoming biennium. And so we had some criteria in looking at that. We tried to, as best we could, align any programs that either had one-time costs, such as a vehicle purchase, or were used as match for another grant or had another funding source dependency associated with it, or reserve funds to be able to use those carryover leftover from prior bienniums, just because that isn't funding that's going to be renewed every biennium or every year. That's more one-time funding that we're looking at. Well, we try to ensure that core services remain funded with STIF formula funds, where we'd anticipate that within the boundaries of what is generated through the payroll tax, we can hopefully expect to see on an ongoing basis, so that core centralized services like our ADA paratransit and fixed route services will continue to be able to maintain stable funding over time. Within that, there's a few programs where we made substantive changes just to be able to stay within budget. So the original budget that was presented was oversubscribed. So we have more things that we'd like to be able to do than there are funds to be able to do that. And so we did make some adjustments to be able to fit within that essentially a budget neutral proposal here. First is veterans transportation. Based on current utilization, we feel like we can reduce that to from originally a 100K ask down to 50K. So basically projecting less growth over the upcoming biennium than we might otherwise more aggressively try to pursue. Our transit host program, we were able to reduce that from 150K to 75K. That essentially removes adding Springfield Station from the proposal of having transit hosts. So that would be an addition that we originally were looking to propose that we're removing. The Diamond Express, we were able to reduce from 231K to 170K, and that's entirely due to the more favorable match rate we received through the STIF discretionary process. So that was I think both kind of a great win and great news for our community for all of those discretionary projects that Kathleen mentioned. Is those favorable match rates allow us to stretch our dollars further in the STIF formula plan. So we would have had to make, I think, more drastic changes or cuts if we had to pay a increased match rate. So that was great news for us to see. The K through 12 student pass program, we're able to reduce from 1.98 million to $1,795,883. It's a very specific amount because we are trying to stay to the dollar within the 120% limit that ODOT assigns to us. And they've noted any STIF plans that are above even $1, the 120% limit will be returned and rejected. So we're ensuring that we have the maximum use of every dollar that may be possible. It doesn't mean that we may not be able to make changes in the future, but that would be through an amendment process, which would be fairly significant. So we're trying to be as flexible as we can with the estimates as they've been received. And then finally,
John, I was just going to mention something about the student pass program, which is just a note. You may have seen that we're required to put 1% of our overall STIF funds towards K-12 student passes, and we're still close to 10%. So I just wanted to note that even with the small cut that we have to make there.
Yeah, that's a great point, is that we're far exceeding our minimum requirements. And in being able to make this change, we're not suggesting that we would serve fewer people. It's that we were able to very closely analyze current utilization and more narrowly estimate that we think that in the upcoming biennium will probably be roughly within that number. So noting that we do have some flexibility if we do need to make changes, but I think that cuts it a bit closer for purposes of staying within our 120% budget. And then on the next slide, one additional change is to our low income fare program. Change of 1.5 million to $1 million. This actually isn't a service reduction. It's looking at current utilization and estimating that we won't grow quicker than we might otherwise had we had a larger budget in place. So we don't anticipate that we would serve fewer nonprofits in the upcoming biennium. We don't anticipate that we would serve fewer people, but I think we will need to we have seen this program grow and we have been working with more and more nonprofits in the area. So we will need to be more selective looking into the future, but we feel like we can fit the current program within that overall budget. And then moving on, I'm going to hand it over to Dave to speak to the next programs.
Hi, everyone. Dave Roth, Director of Planning at LTD. So I'll go over the next 5 projects and the revisions to the budgets on those. So starting off with, or the next 5 tasks rather within our overall project, just to clarify. Task 20 is our transit shared mobility system integration and modernization, otherwise known as the bike share investment for LTD. So this one was reduced by $1.26 million for a total project budget of 1.74. And we had started at $3 million total for this over the biennium. And this is impactful, but it doesn't eliminate our opportunity going forward. And I think, you know, if you look at page 11 and 12 in your packet, you'll see, you know, we've identified in some of the columns here, we've got STIF formula funds or STIF carryover, and then leveraged funds. The cell is blank here for leveraged funds, but I do want to just mention that we will need to seek additional grant funding. So the STIF dollars will allow us to leverage additional funds. We're just not at a point where we're ready to identify what those are yet. There's some opportunities on the horizon, and STIF will be a really important piece of leveraging additional dollars. Task 21, Transit Access and Safety Improvement Program. This is one of the projects where we've reduced the overall request to $2 over the biennium. And again, getting back to some of our conversation at our last meeting, effectively, you know, we don't have a budget for this project, but we're still including the task within our overall plan, because we want to have that flexibility to deliver on this program if we have some funds available that we can move around, say, halfway through the next biennium. I'll also mention that there are other ways that we might be able to accomplish the goals of this program using other funding, non-STIF funding sources. So we've got a concept here that I think is pretty sound, and I think we've heard a lot of support for. We just might have to look elsewhere for funding to deliver on that going forward. Task 22, the Community Outcomes Initiative pilot. We've reduced this in half, so from $500,000 down to $250,000 over the biennium. This does allow us to do a pilot, probably a little smaller pilot, but this is an important project to be able to deliver on some of the outcomes that we're talking about in terms of how our mobility options support the community. Task 24, the Rural Lane County On-Demand Pilot. So this is one of the STIF discretionary awards. So this project budget was reduced by $20,000 for a total request of $180,000, and we're still able to deliver that project with this slight reduction. Finally, Task 29, which is the Downtown and Riverfront Connector match. This is also one of the STIF discretionary awards that's on its way to Oregon Transportation Commission right now. And we had initially put in about $100,000 for this match, but we're able to reduce that down to $2 because we can utilize our existing service on Route 1 and the funding that's going towards that particular route as match for the downtown circulator. So we won't necessarily need to use STIF funding for that. We can just use the existing service as match. So I'll hand it back to John.
Great. So next slide, if you don't mind. The final two tasks I was going to speak on are the Sustainable Service Reserve and contingency funds. These are essentially a math equation for us. So Sustainable Service Reserves, LTD policy requires us to maintain 6 months of reserve funds to be able to support these services. So as we made reductions to our other tasks, so too did this decrease the amount of reserve funds we'd be required to retain to be able to support these services. The contingency funds are a flat 20%. So when we put forward a 120% budget, the additional 20% is entirely going towards this contingency plan. So obviously we aren't guaranteed any STIF funds. They're estimates based on payroll tax revenue that we'll receive over the course of the upcoming biennium. So there's some risk in programming in funds above 100%. We've got this in a contingency task so that we can easily move that over. So you see that we've got these $2 funded projects. If payroll tax revenues do come in above 100%, it makes it easier for us to be more nimble to adapt to that. So far, signs from ODOT have been optimistic that we are going to be closer to that 120% range. So that's where that sits until we can actually have some certainty.
Before we move on to the link lane adjustments, do folks have any questions or comments about what they've just heard?
Yeah, Josh Kaczynski.
For some of these programs where you sort of right size based on demand, I'm thinking of the veterans transportation and the low income bears. Is STIF the only funding source for those, or if demand was higher, people are utilizing these services more, are there resources available to scale those up?
That's a great question. So in short, I would say they're part of a comprehensive transportation solution that LTD provides to our community. So I would say, depending on what someone's needs are, we probably have other transportation services that might help benefit someone. Something like a veterans transportation program is very specifically targeted to make sure that we've got low or no cost options for people within that specific category. But if someone said, I need to get to the grocery store and they have a disability, we could typically use a service like RideSource, but we would charge someone $3.50 fare. So this is a way of kind of acknowledging there are certain services in which we're either trying to provide gap transportation or be able to supplement services where they're either inadequate or we can be of better use to our community. So I would say that there are additional resources that we can leverage as part of this comprehensive transportation solution that we provide to our community. Particularly with veterans transportation as an example, that's an area where we see there's a lot of opportunity for potential growth. So I think when we've looked at our utilization in prior years, we feel like we can scale that a little bit to be realistic with what we're able to accomplish in the upcoming biennium within that. And then acknowledging we've got our contingency fund if payroll tax revenues do come in higher, we can support services if they come in at increased utilization. So I would characterize this as we're cutting our budgets a lot closer than what was originally presented. But if actual STIF revenue does come in at that optimistic level that we're starting to hear, then we'd be well positioned to be able to support increased utilization if that does come our way. So that in turn can motivate us to be able to encourage ridership.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions or comments from the committee? Anybody online? No? All right. Well, thank you both. Appreciate that. And I think Kathleen, we're heading back to you, correct?
Actually, we're going to turn it over to Kate.
Oh,
who's
to
gonna
Kate,
talk
okay.
about the link lane budget adjustments.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kate.
Yep. So I think we've already talked about these a bit, but because we got the match rate that we were not quite expecting, we were hoping for, we were able to reduce the formula budgets that we need for both the Florence to Yachats connector operations and the Eugene to Florence connector operations. So we were able to reduce the STIF formula funds that needs for a total request. That's like, I think, even half of what we originally thought we might ask for. So that's the main difference with those two, which then again, just like with LTD, that then reduced what our contingency ask was for.
All right. Anything else, Kate, on that? No. Okay. Thank you. Any committee members have any additional questions or thoughts, comments for Kate? All right. Hearing none. Kathleen, I think you are up next.
We now want to just show you our overall proposed budget for the entire STIF formula plan and the results of those budget adjustments that you've just heard about. And you can see that as of the last meeting, we had about 3.6 million overage, and we've eliminated that. And we now have a balanced budget to present to ODOT.
That's great.
This is also, if that's hard to read, it's also, I believe, on the bottom of page 7 in your packet. Yeah, the very bottom of page 7 in your packet.
All right. Any questions or comments for Kathleen on the overall?
I have one.
Oh, Carrie, yes.
Kathleen, can you just remind us on the 17 million LTD carryover. How does ODOT look at that when they're evaluating all the STIF funding? And then second part of that question, is there a risk that LTD won't spend all of that? And can it get carried over again?
Yeah. So the STIF formula funds, when they come back into our community, they stay in our community. And so right now, I think mostly because of COVID and all of the things that came after COVID, that we haven't been able to spend all this all that money locally. And so, but ODOT is fine with that. It has to go into a STIF plan, into a new STIF plan, and the STIF committee would make recommendations on it, just like you all are doing right now. So for instance, that money was in the previous STIF plan, some of the same projects that maybe didn't get finalized, but we have to come back to the STIF committee and almost present them as new projects each time to get your approval. And then ODOT is fine with that. ODOT has asked that we separate it into the current biennium and the carryover for this conversation, but then after that, it's not, and they ask that we track it, but that's all. In terms of how it's spent, it's all local decision-making happens for it.
And is there any risk that because that money didn't get spent previously, does it call into question any of the asks for this time around?
No, I don't think so. I think there will be a review by ODOT to make sure that all of the projects meet their criteria for STIF, but it's not tied at all to if it got spent in the past biennium or not.
Okay, cool.
I have a question related to that. So when we look at our packet and current presentations, we talked about, the strategy of having two big projects with all these tasks in there. And then Kate, you were talking about, with this question that Carrie had, the potential to, have things move or whatever, and it would have to be reviewed again. If we're approving this with the tasks, does it still go through that kind of review with ODOT? If things are moved or not, if they're just tasks versus projects?
It depends on the funding amount.
Okay.
is the
Sort of like a
there
threshold
is, there's very specific rules that don't allow you to move certain things between projects. You can move sometimes, and they're very specific.
Tasks or projects?
Projects. So this gives us more flexibility.
Right.
Like we're not going to be tied to those rules that say like you can't move it between this and this.
Right.
And instead it'll be more like, hey, we want to move it between these two tasks.
Okay.
And I would say also ODOT would like this money to get spent in the community, you know, and so I think they're gonna hopefully be also very supportive.
Okay, great. And if I may, another question. So I think I heard you talk about 100% being kind of the perhaps like average or realistical, but then the optimistic would be 120%, but all signs are potentially pointing to 120%, correct? And so that would boost this up, is that correct? Beyond this or not?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, so then that would allow for more flexibility to then, for instance, some of these projects that only have $2 in them, there would be a funds available to move from the contingency to that project. Or for instance, if there was another project that costs, that costs more money unexpectedly, we can move to that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Other questions from the committee or comments? All right. Well, thank you so much for that. And Kathleen, do you have more to present on this topic?
What I've done is just put up here on the next two slides. And again, it's hard to see. It's much more easy to see this table on pages 11 and 12. I just wanted the committee to have an overview of the entire proposed plan. That also shows you what we've allocated for STIF formula funds and what we hope to use the STIF carryover for. It shows you the leverage funds, because I know we talked about that last time about the importance of making use of those leveraged funds. So I wanted to show you how much leverage funds we've got for each of these different tasks. And I've also identified the Oregon Public Transportation Plan goals that each task meets.
All right. Any questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none.
This is
Oh,
Phil
yeah.
Barnhart.
Hi, Phil.
I've been listening as we've been talking about the adjustments that got made. And so far, I haven't heard very much in the way of what the considerations were for the changes and what the effects those are likely to have on the actual programs. Are we expecting to have those coming up? I mean, so far, it looks like the staff has done a great job of trying to conform these budgets to the funds that are available. But what their considerations were and how they made the changes and what the effects on the programs are less obvious to me. I don't know whether we're going to get to that tonight or not, but I'm hoping we will.
That's a great question. I'm happy to speak to that. So I think we're presenting staff recommendation, and part of our consideration was how do we minimize the impact of making any type of changes to the budget to make sure that it can essentially fit within the allocation estimate. So it has been, I think, staff's work to be able to present this in a balanced way that really minimizes both just impacts that we might expect for any service on the street, as well as ensuring that we're doing this in a way that's going to be sustainable in future bienniums. So we're not front loading funds into programs that we don't think that we could support on an ongoing basis. So we are noting there are some programs though where we've put $2 budgets where currently the money isn't there. And I have mentioned that the kind of preliminary estimates, and a lot can change, are optimistic that we do think that signs are pointing towards us being able to more fully fund some of these programs. So we do have these placeholders to be able to do that. When we've asked ODOT whether or not we might increase our estimates accordingly based on more recent information, their ask to us has been, no, keep it at that 120% level for now based on the original estimates. And then if need be, if something were to dramatically change, we do have the ability in mid-biennium to do an amendment if there's a drastic change, but we're still within an above 20% original estimate limit that would give us the flexibility to make those changes at any point throughout the biennium. So I think staff has been very careful to try and present this in a way where we're trying to maximize and stretch dollars throughout programs in a way that hopefully will have minimal impacts for any of our riders.
Thank you. I appreciate that cautious approach. I think that's really important, especially given potential changes that may happen in the national economy that may affect all kinds of revenue issues in Oregon. I'm assuming as part of that those considerations that if you had to, you would be able to figure out how to make cuts with the least impact on the total operation of the transit district. Is that a fair understanding on my part, or have I missed it somehow?
No, I think that's a reasonable interpretation, Phil. We definitely looked at impacts as we were making these budget adjustments and tried to minimize any impact to LTD's ridership. And I also wanted to note that we also took into consideration the feedback we got from this committee at the last meeting in terms of what they were considering priorities or areas they thought could afford to be trimmed a little bit. And so we took that feedback into consideration as well when we are making these adjustments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Other comments or questions? Yeah, I just, for myself, wanted to compliment staff. I feel like you all really, it's clear you put a lot of thought and care into what you had to trim back. And I felt like you listened to our committee where we had talked about new services versus existing, whether you're maintaining existing or expanding existing, things like that. And it's such a tough situation to look at all of these really valuable projects and services and then not fund everything 100%. It's good against good, so to speak. So thank you for that hard work. Appreciate it. Without hearing any other comments or questions, Kathleen, let me ask, do you have some more info to present us?
No, I don't. I really just wanted everyone to have a good chance to look at the entire proposed plan. At the very end of your PowerPoint, for just informational purposes only, I put the various STIF criteria. And if you need to look at those again, there are other things to consider, such as, like we talked about, the student fair programs, things like that. And then I'll leave the rest to you there, Dave.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Thank you, Kathleen. Well done. Well, I'm going to open it up for any final discussion on all of this before I call for a motion. Ultimately, our goal is to make a recommendation on this packet to the LTD board. And I see Kathleen did in the PowerPoint, I believe she put a draft motion. Yeah, she'll pull that up here in a minute, but for those in person, they're in our printed packet for us to consider. So for those online, I think Kathleen's still trying to get it to that slide, but I'm seeing Josh raise his hand here in person.
While we're waiting for that, I just have some comments,
Yeah,
if that's all
please,
right.
please.
I want to echo the appreciation for staff for the hard work, both from LTD and LCOG on putting together this plan, but also in the way you've presented the materials. I had a lot of questions through this process, but I think you've done a really good job of presenting this in a clear format that's understandable. And I think that's good both for us as a committee, but also for any members of the public who are reviewing this and want confidence in the way we're spending their money. I also want to express appreciation. It was a couple of months ago that we reviewed those discretionary applications, but you guys did a really good job with that based on the outcome. I looked at the PTAC materials and all of the Lane County projects were ranked near the top. And so I don't know that our projects are necessarily better or more worthy than others around the state, but I think we did a good job of expressing the importance of those. And when I say we, I really mean you as staff. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just really want to thank everybody on the committee as well. I mean, we've very much valued your input on the discretionary projects. So thank you for that.
Great.
And your input throughout this whole process over the past couple of months.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Well, I don't think we had luck getting to the slide with the recommended motion, but you don't necessarily have to read that. It was just worded as a recommendation, but I will call for any motions on a recommendation, either in favor or against or something in between. All right. So I hear Carrie's getting ready to make a motion.
I move to recommend to the LTD Board of Directors the STIF formula plan presented to LTD's STIF Advisory Committee on December 3rd, 2024, which meets the criteria specified in the Oregon Administrative Rules.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. So there's a motion on the floor to, we have a second.
I'll second.
Josh Kaczynski seconds the motion. I'll pause here for any further discussion before a vote. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, well, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, it sounds as if we have unanimous approval of the motion for a recommendation to the LTD board. Staff, anything else you have for us tonight?
Go right ahead.
I just was gonna give a quick thank you to a few of our members who've served on the committee for the last 4 cycles, which is, I believe that right now the Stiff Advisory Committee bylaws do have people cycling off after that time. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to Eugene and to Phil and to Susie for being with us through many years of ups and downs. And thank you all for serving on this committee.
Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you, I would echo that thank you to those mentioned. Appreciate your service.
Could I add a comment?
Yeah,
this is Phil Barnhart, and I appreciate very much having been appointed to this committee and the things that I have learned by being on the committee, in addition to being among those whose job it was to review these plans. I think I want to say that I appreciate very much the district staff, the staff of LCOG, the work that they have done, and the careful planning for the continued development of our community through the work of the transit district. I think it's critically important that we get this right, and that based on what I have seen, both here and in prior work in the legislature, I think we're on the right track. It's a long road to go, but we're moving in the right direction, and I appreciate it very much. I appreciate the committee, and good luck on the next set of reviews.
Thank you so much, Phil. Appreciate those words to everybody. And I think Pete Knox, you have a comment?
Yeah, just thank you all for sending the recommendation to the board. I really appreciate all of your time and in working with this. This stuff is complicated. It's a lot to understand, and I will be letting the board know that you get that with all your hard work, that you made a unanimous recommendation. So thank you very much for all of what you've done.
Sure. Thank you, Pete. Yes, Cosette.
I would just like to acknowledge Dave Reeser as our chair. You've done a wonderful job managing and facilitating our meetings. So much appreciated. Great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So we don't have any,
Yes, I was just gonna say,
talk?
we had a slide that you can't see saying our next meeting is December 10th, but it is not.
That's right.
We've concluded this portion of our work, so we will not be meeting on the 10th. I do want to just talk about quickly about some future plans for this committee.
Okay.
If you you might remember at our last meeting when John Allen was talking about sections 5310 and 5311 funding, that he mentioned something called the coordinated plan. That's actually short for the Lane Transit District Coordinated Human Services Public Transportation Plan. It's a mouthful.
Well done.
And we are starting we haven't updated that plan since 2019. We are starting an update of it in January, we believe. And we would love to convene this committee at some point in the upcoming year, maybe in springtime or early summer. Dave, you think?
Yeah, mic on. We'll determine a timeline for the sort of the engagement plan for this project. And yeah, I think this is the right committee to be involved.
We would love to get your feedback as we're developing that plan and updating it. It covers many of the projects that you've learned about during this whole STIF process.
Great.
So.
Okay, great.
So I will be in touch in springtime about that.
Awesome. Well, we will look forward to that. And can you clarify for you mentioned some outgoing members, would they are they outgoing as of today, or would that be after that, or to be determined?
Kate, what's the?
I think it's, I guess technically it would be through the end of this biennium, so
Okay,
still be on the committee.
so they're still on the hook.
Sorry, just
Yeah.
kidding.
Oh,
I'll
wow.
call you out again in the next meeting.
Yeah,
You thought you were done.
well, we'll hope for more food, so that always helps.
But other than that, before we wrap up, I really just want to reiterate, give you all my heartfelt thanks. It's my first run doing this. You've all been so gracious. And it's been wonderful to work with all of you, and I'm so grateful for your hard work.
Thanks.
So
Thank you so
all, and
much.
Thank you,
Catherine.
especially Dave,
Yeah,
for
of
cheering
course.
for
Yeah,
us.
my pleasure. All right, well, what a wonderful way to wrap up, and we are wrapping up early nonetheless. So want to wish everybody safe travels home, happy holidays, and we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.